Thanks for coming in today.
Thanks for having me.
It's a real pleasure to have you here. Can you just start off by give us a little introduction of yourself, where you came from, your early part of your career, and how you came to be in China?
So I'm here as a lecturer in the Department of Strategy and Entrepreneurship. But I originally come from Korea. So I did most of my growing up in Korea, and my early years were spent in Korea. Until I went to the US for college, and my undergraduate degree was in business. And I guess I really loved the whole analytical parts of it, the whole reading and writing parts of it. And those were exactly the kinds of things that you would be doing as a researcher. And I continued on with that path and eventually did a PhD and then came to China.
It seems you've done quite a lot of traveling up to this point. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
I guess I was fortunate enough to have the opportunities to travel a lot in different countries. In terms of growing up, I've spent some years in Canada, in the US, some time in Japan, some time in Germany, and a part of it was because of my parents and their jobs. But also, I just enjoyed travel and going to different places and learning about the different cultures.
And here you are in China.
Yes.
How long were you in the States for?
So a little more than 10 years.
10 years. That's quite not a short amount of time.
I have family in the US actually. My grandparents were there and I was pretty close with them. So I was going back and forth, visiting them even before getting an education there officially.
What did you actually study in your degrees?
As an undergraduate, my majors were in finance and international business. So my PhD was in strategy. It was in management, but in strategic management, and field-wise, my studies were mostly in entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And this was in Texas.
Okay. What attracted you to do a PhD in that topic? Was it like a natural progression from what you were studying before? Or?
I guess so. So somewhere between when I was doing my master's, I think that's when I decided that some of the most interesting problems to study were in strategy, and a lot of it didn't really have any answers, and that's where the challenge was, but also where the interest was.
Yeah. Obviously now you're in China, a new chapter in your career. Why did you choose China, and how did you come here?
To be honest, I think a part of it is just CEIBS in Shanghai. And those were the same decisions that I had for going to the US. The universities, the institutions, the cities. So CEIBS, I've known about it, but I didn't really think very seriously about it until I saw the job opportunity. But when I did, from the beginning, I was just very impressed by everything that the school was. Very international. Even from the communications with the staffs, the conversations with the faculty here. And I was actually fortunate enough to do an official visit on campus in person. And I was just very impressed.
From your own background was quite international. I guess coming to China was maybe like the next attractive step in terms of going somewhere different to learn something new. Was that part of the reason?
I think so. So the first time I came to China was 2005.
Wow.
So it was quite a long time ago. Yeah, and in between I had traveled back and forth just to visit, and I've seen some of the changes that were happening here. And Shanghai it's become a really big metropolitan place where a lot of people, interesting things are going on, and so I guess all of that mattered for the decision.
As a Korean person then, when you come to China, it's culturally, I guess, is not as big a difference as, for example, European and American people. How have you found it so far? You've been in China for how long now? About roughly a year or so?
Yeah.
How has it been the first year?
it's not just about the cultural similarities. I think a lot of it is how developed this place is right now in terms of technology. And so the first visit that I did, I was able to, in a matter of a few days, call share cabs or order delivery and all of things I probably could not have managed because my Chinese is, just not very good. But I could still do it because of the apps and the technologies. And so I guess that part really closed the gap of cultural difference for me.
Yeah. Was that a surprise to you?
I think so. It's just incomparable compared to a lot of the places.
Yeah. How does that compare with Korea right now in terms of ordering things online and e-commerce? Is it similar there or?
In terms of ordering things online, I think it's pretty similar. And I think it has more to do with Shanghai being a very densely populated big city. Seoul is very much the same. For example, the payment system, we still carry around. So if I go back to Korea, I still carry around a wallet with my ID cards and credit cards and everything. And you just don't think about doing that here.
Yeah, it's pretty convenient.
Yeah.
It's a lot more convenient than back home. Same situation for me. What's been the biggest surprise so far in terms of day-to-day life?
I'm constantly surprised by how big this place is.
Have you gotten lost yet in Shanghai?
Not lost, but so for example, they would tell me this place is 15-minute walk from the station, and so I planned my travels that way. But then even within the station, it takes 15 minutes for me to go from one place to the other, and it just surprises me every time how big the city is, how big the country is.
Yeah. How about in the city itself? Do you have any favourite parts of town, or is there anything particular you found which is quite impressive?
So I remember telling you this. So I started climbing here.
Wow. And
I'm still doing it. I've officially joined the Korean Boulders of Shanghai. It's got a tradition of more than 10 years.
Wow, that's amazing. It's a very illuminating revelation there.
But the thing is, there's not that many places in the world where you could do it indoors to such an extent. For example, if I go back to Korea, I'd have a hard time doing it. So this is the only place where I could very freely access these indoor high ceiling climbing gyms.
Great, that is interesting actually. And is this a hobby you've had for a long time? Was it?
No, I started in Shanghai and loving it so far. Yeah.
Wow, so it's like you reached new heights in Shanghai.
Yeah, literally.
What was it about that? Was there something in particular about that hobby which attracted you, or you just had the chance, you thought you'd try it?
It's simply a good workout, and also it's you do it with a lot of people because you can't constantly do it. You have to take rest. But when you're doing it, you're completely on your own, and you just forget about everything there is in life and just concentrate on climbing.
You said it's a Korean group, you said, yeah?
Yeah.
Right, so I would never imagine there was a Korean climbing group in Shanghai. That's really cool.
There must be several Korean sports interest groups.
Right,
yeah.
Football, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's become like a good way to kind of get a social aspect.
Yeah.
And how were you surprised to find the size of the Korean community in Shanghai? Is it fair to say it's quite large?
I think so,
yeah.
Compared to many of the cities that I've so far lived in.
Is that something which is good? Or?
It's very good.
Right.
I get to get some really good Korean food.
Yeah.
It's important.
Can you give us any recommendations for those out there who like to enjoy Korean food?
There's a Korea town around Bushi that has many good restaurants. I would actually recommend once the borders open a little bit. So Seoul is closer from Shanghai than Beijing. So by flight.
Right.
So if I would recommend thinking about a weekend trip to Seoul if that opens up, actually.
I've been to Seoul actually. It's really nice. Really, I was surprised that it was much closer than I imagined, and it was definitely an eye opener. But one of the surprising things is that I've been to that part of Shanghai, the Koreatown area, just at first glance, you can actually forget that you're in Shanghai. You know, there's so many shop fronts and stuff with the Korean script and so on. How did you feel when you encountered that area?
I mean, I've heard about it. Maybe that's why I didn't really have any different expectations. I blend in, so I don't look foreign to a lot of people here.
Yeah.
And even if I go to Koreatown, people would talk to me in Chinese and would get surprised that I don't.
Have you ever tried any translation software?
I have.
Is it effective?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially between Chinese and English, I was constantly impressed by how good the translation is. Between Korean and Chinese, not so much, but between Chinese and English, I think there's been huge developments. Exactly because of that, I've been able to communicate quite conveniently.
Yeah. What do you, just to kind of come back to CEIBS then, who do you lecture the MBA students or?
Yeah, so I've been teaching MBA students. It's a course called Entrepreneurial Finance and Resource Management. And I'm actually really excited to be teaching this because it's not something that's planned out. It's something that I've personally designed. It's really closely aligned to what I do in terms of research, which is in entrepreneurship. So and the students have been, I think they've been enjoying it as much as I.
Okay, how do you feel about the feedback from the students so far? What have you learned from their responses?
They varied a lot in terms of how deeply involved they are in terms of this topic. So some of them were really keen on learning the immediately applicable practical stuff because they were actually looking to create their own companies. But others were just generally interested in the whole phenomenon and wanting to have maybe a little bit of a perspective in how to look at things. So there was a huge variance there, but mostly were enthusiastic.
How closely aligned is what you teach with your research?
So my research has been really focused on entrepreneurs and how they view things and how they interact with key people like investors, and how that matters for their companies. So a lot of that are the decisions that we discuss in the classroom. So very, very aligned.
Okay, so Sae, thanks very much for coming in today. It's been a really interesting conversation.
Thank you for having me.